tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I've been panicked over the last little bit with the uncertainty.
Restocking liquor store shelves, what it means for you as thousands of government workers stand down on job action. And the movement lining up with new guidelines, how more people are embracing sobriety.
Just felt like we shocked the world. Nobody expected that to happen, so I think we have lots to be proud of.
The Vancouver team representing Canada at the Little League World Series touches down at YVR.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with devastating floods in Pakistan and the British Columbians stepping in to help. The UN and Pakistan have appealed for more than $200 million in emergency funding.
Pakistan is awash in suffering.
More than 1,000 people have died since mid-June. Weeks of unprecedented monsoons have affected more than 33 million people and devastated a country already trying to revive a struggling economy. So far, Canada has announced $5 million in funding for humanitarian assistance on the ground. And as the calls to help rise, Michelle Kassoub tells us there are groups here in BC raising money to help.
The Pakistani people are facing a monsoon on steroids.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres not mincing his words when describing the situation on the ground in Pakistan. A third of the country is underwater. Floods have killed over 1,000 people and affected the lives of 33 million others. The calls for aid are urgent.
We are reaching out to the international community to assist because it is beyond the means of my country to single-handedly tackle a catastrophe of these proportions.
Canada's federal government has so far announced $5 million in funding for humanitarian assistance to partner agencies on the ground, including food and cash for those in the most affected areas. The UN has called for $160 million in donations. The BC Muslim Association of BC has raised $150,000, including $100,000 from one anonymous donor.
He said, all I want, this money should reach to the people and they can buy some food and somebody can provide the food. And at this point, I can simply say his disclosure that he's from India. He's not from Pakistan. He is Punjabi brother, very respectful, but his act of kindness speaks very louder, very clear.
These floods are being called a climate-induced catastrophe.
We are very, very low on the emissions index, but on the vulnerability index, we are in probably top 5. And these recent rains and floods are a manifestation of the vulnerability that we face.
A warning that more disasters are likely as the climate continues to change. Michelle Kassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Pakistani government says any inadvertent delay by the international community in helping victims will be devastating. Salima Shivji has the story on how ordinary people are trying to cope with the environmental disaster.
The relentless rains may have stopped for a spell, but the deluge is everywhere. The devastation complete. Huge swaths of land, a full third of the country, now underwater, with millions of Pakistanis forced to scramble for shelter on whatever dry square of land they can find. That reality is barely sinking in. We lost everything in the water. We only escaped with a few things, this man says. Now we sit here out in the open. At the mercy of the elements, the heat stifling. This farmer has been sleeping outside for a week. Only now has he gathered enough supplies to build a meager roof for his family. We have nothing. I can't even feed my children, he says. We need help. That need is acute all across Pakistan's 4 provinces, where thousands of homes and roads are now gone. An estimated $10 billion in damages in a country already in the throes of an economic crisis.
At the moment, our main concern is to save lives.
And aid workers are struggling to keep up and get to those in need.
It's really, really devastating. The infrastructure has been completely decimated. And you know, this is not the only worry. When the water subsides, is all the waterborne diseases that we're afraid will come.
But relief is still far off, with the waters of Pakistan's main rivers so swollen and more rain to come later in the week. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
This summer's monsoon rains are not just a problem in Pakistan. Neighboring India is dealing with a swollen Ganges River that's flooding its banks as well. Relentless rains have caused the river to overflow and inundate nearby communities. These residents say they lost all their belongings to the flood, and with whole neighborhoods underwater, many locals don't know where to go to keep dry. Monsoon season from June to September accounts for more than 70% of India's annual rainfall. Let's bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe now. And Joe, what part is climate change playing in all of this?
Anita, as we heard from Michelle earlier in the show, there is a direct link. Right now, climate scientists are trying to figure out exactly how much of a factor climate change was in the increased likelihood of the kinds of floods we're seeing right now. So when we go back to the BC floods, very different setup, but that rapid assessment found that that situation here in BC last fall was twice as likely to have happened because of climate change. So I imagine we'll see a number like that, potentially more staggering in the next couple of weeks as climate scientists try and assess what that impact is. But we know that a warmer climate holds more moisture, and the latest IPCC report did indicate monsoon rains will become more erratic and more intense. I want to take you back home and show you the kinds of extreme weather we're watching today across the province. Heat. The rainfall warnings have ended in through the north. We still have heat warnings in place, though, for parts of East Vancouver Island, the Sunshine Coast, the Fraser Canyon, and the center of that high pressure ridge, the apex, is really centered right over where you see those warnings. It's beginning to shift east, though. You can see those heat warnings expanded to parts of Alberta, all thanks to this high pressure, which is also bringing record-breaking heat south of the border, Washington, Oregon, California, seeing temperatures close to the 40s today. And we did break a few daily temperature records. Pemberton, Port Alberni, Whistler, even West Vancouver getting into the low 30s today. Anita, the hot spot across the province, Lytton at 39 degrees. We will see a little bit of a cool down over the next couple of days, but not much. It is going to remain hot for a couple more days. So I'll talk about a cool down that might come just in time for the weekend a little bit later on in the show.
Great, thanks, Joe. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
To other news now, picket lines outside BC liquor and cannabis distribution locations are coming down. The province's largest union is pausing job action as a sign of goodwill. Our Leanne Young joins us live now. And Leanne, the union says significant progress has been made at the bargaining table with the province. So where are negotiations at?
Well, Anita, we heard from the BC General Employees Union this morning that the two sides are getting closer to a tentative agreement. Enough progress that they've agreed to stop job action in good faith. So BCGEU members have been picketing for the last 2 weeks outside BC liquor and cannabis distribution branches in Delta, Richmond, and Kamloops, along with the Wholesale Customer Centre in Victoria. And last Monday, the union brought in a ban on any overtime work. All of this led the province to start rationing the amount of alcohol products that consumers can buy. But effective immediately, the overtime ban has ended and preparations are underway to end picket lines. We don't have exact details yet on the agreement because nothing has yet been ratified. And both sides have agreed not to speak to media until everything is hashed out.
Now, Leanne, this job action created a lot of problems for various sectors in this province, including liquor, cannabis. What are retailers saying today?
Well, I mean, obviously they're excited. It wasn't just consumers who had to ration their purchases. Bars, restaurants, cannabis shops, they all had some of its inventory levels essentially come to a stop during the 2 weeks of picketing. We heard from a number of cannabis shops who told us they were forced to close since they didn't have enough product. Staff were laid off. One wine agency owner we spoke to today, who largely deals with international wines, says she hasn't really sold anything in about 2 weeks, waiting for shipments that were coming from abroad distributed by BC Liquor. So she and others were thrilled to hear today that workers are going back on the job.
I've been panicked over the last little bit with the uncertainty of when things are going to reopen. There's only so much that you can do. So obviously the longer that it went on, the larger that reality became.
Over the course of the last week, we saw about 50 stores across BC close their doors, which represents about 500 jobs. Luckily, because those closures were relatively recent, there's a really strong likelihood that we'll be able to hire back that staff.
So for consumers, business is expected to return to normal fairly soon. But for those businesses affected, they are anticipating a slow ramp up. With everyone clamoring now to get shipments again, they are expecting a significant backlog before their shelves are fully stocked again. Anita?
It's Arlene Young reporting live tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The province is hinting that more help could be on the way to make life more affordable for people in BC. Finance Minister Selina Robinson made these comments after revealing the province's billion-dollar surplus. As Mira Baines reports, the opposition says that money could have been put to use sooner.
BC's economy came roaring back. However, the average household now struggles with the rising cost of living.
But it's largely because of how dynamic and robust the BC economy has been. None of us could have predicted coming out of COVID that we would have had such a huge bounce.
BC was projected to have a $9.7 billion deficit, but instead now has a $1.3 billion surplus for the last fiscal year. Pandemic trends were a factor. More people bought real estate starting in March 2020 through to this spring. Housing prices also shot up during that time. More recently, tourism has reopened.
There was certainly an element to a very active housing market and increased prices for sure that we didn't anticipate. But we certainly saw income taxes were higher, corporate taxes were higher.
Even so, households are being squeezed as people struggle with rising prices and higher interest rates aimed at taming inflation. But with so much extra revenue, critics are asking if the province could have been doing more sooner to address affordability and the crisis in healthcare. Robinson says new government measures are on the way.
We've been working to make sure that we can target the right people, because not everybody is equally impacted by these inflationary pressures.
BC Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau says the National Bank of Canada in March predicted a budget surplus for the province.
What is surprising is that this government, knowing that it had a surplus, is not acting with urgency on so many crises that people in British Columbia are facing right now.
The official opposition says the renters rebate and other measures could have helped.
The temporary suspension of provincial gas taxes, especially while we were seeing gas as expensive as it was for large portions of the spring and early summer, would have been a help.
The province will likely face a bleaker financial future due to a slower housing market, rising interest rates, and less consumer spending. That could potentially mean even more people looking for financial relief. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
There's concern tonight the province has not taken the action to protect old-growth forests as it had promised to do so a year ago. This is the accusation from First Nation leaders and conservationists who have taken satellite images to look more closely at the land. Just shy of 1 year ago, the province released maps and a commitment to put off logging 2.6 million hectares of old-growth forest. Now, following an investigation from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and Stand Earth, they say the province is not taking that action and estimate 55,000 hectares are not being protected or have been harvested already.
The bottom line is that the province is not actually stopping the logging industry from harvesting old growth over the short term, when stopping this logging was precisely the point of the deferrals process. The forests that actually require the province to defer logging are still at immediate risk of being lost.
They accuse the province of misleading the public in regards to conservation. A newly rebuilt school in Port Coquitlam is ready to welcome more than 500 students.
The funding from the Ministry of Education and Childcare, along with financial support from School District 43, will ensure that the education needs of students are met in this region for many years to come. Building safe and modern schools and ensuring students have the resources they need for a quality education remains amongst our board's top priorities.
The province says Irvine Elementary has been upgraded to $26.7 million in a facility that will benefit local families and add more than 100 extra students. Officials say it's all part of an ongoing program to create more learning spaces in the Tri-Cities area. $135 million was recently approved to build a new 1,000-seat middle secondary school on Burke Mountain. It will support future students from grades 6 to 12, and it's expected to be ready for students in the fall of 2026. The Canada Day terror plot of 2013 could be headed back to court. The couple accused of planting bombs at the BC legislature have launched a lawsuit. John Nuttall and Amanda Korody are suing members of the police, their prosecutors, the governments of Canada and BC. A jury found the couple guilty of plotting a terrorist attack, but the proceedings were stayed. The Court of Appeal found that the police investigation was a travesty of justice with entrapment and abuse of power. The lawsuit they filed on Monday echoes the same phrase, saying the harm they suffered was also a travesty of justice. According to the lawyer representing them, the couple claims they were unjustly kept behind bars.
They say there wouldn't have been any sort of plot if it weren't for the actions of the RCMP, and they say the RCMP violated their rights.
Surveillance footage released during the trial showed the couple making pressure cooker bombs and planting them at the legislature. The bombs did not detonate. Unhoused people in Abbotsford will now have a harder time finding shelter. The city's only drop-in centre is closing after just 10 months. The cabin opened last November, offering food, shelter, and access to services for people in need. It's located on Dallaire Road in a former Tourism Abbotsford building, but now the doors will close on September 30th after City Council denied an extension to the operation. Outreach workers say this will have a big impact on vulnerable people in the city.
It's a real blow to us heading into the winter season. We, like many other communities across the province, are seeing record numbers of people out on our streets, which is already straining our resources. So seeing something like the cabin shutting down just as we're heading into the cold season is a major blow.
While funding was secured for a year of operation starting in August of last year, the shelter wasn't able to open until November. Operators hope to find a new location, but aren't confident there will be workable options. The cabin is a multi-organization project led by Archway Community Services. A longtime politician, Dr. Pat McGeer, has died at the age of 95. McGeer was a leading authority on Alzheimer's research and the causes of the disease and working to create new treatments. He also served as MLA for the Vancouver Point Grey riding from 1962 through 1986 and was cabinet minister from 1976 until his retirement from politics. He and his wife, fellow neuroscientist Edith McGeer, were inducted as officers of the Order of Canada back in 1995. He also played basketball on the Olympic team back in 1948. Well, Vancouver has another candidate hoping to become the city's next mayor. The nonpartisan association's new leader is Fred Harding.
Whatever's gone on in the NPA in the past, those are old issues. What I'm here to tell you now is that I'm the leader now. Everybody's going to have a voice, and we're going to work with consensus. People will absolutely be able to bring their ideas to the table, and people will absolutely have all the authority that they need to raise their ideas and be vocal and be heard. So that's the leadership that's going to happen now.
The former police officer is taking the party reins from the last NPA candidate, John Cooper, who bowed out of the race earlier this month. Harding first ran for mayor in 2018 with the Vancouver First Party, coming in 6th place with a little more than 5,500 votes. After nearly a month away from home, the Little Mountain Little Leaguers were welcomed to cheers as they landed in Vancouver today. The team had been representing Canada at the Little League World Series in Pennsylvania, and while the run to claim the title of best in the world has come to an end, the BC players say representing the country was a dream come true. Isabelle Regam was there when they touched down at YVR.
It's the warm welcome you get when you've spent the last month representing Canada on the world stage.
The past couple weeks have been insane. It's been crazy.
It's that same cheer Vancouver-based Little Mountain Little Leaguers heard mid-August when beating Team Prairies to claim the national title.
That is strike three, and Little Mountain has reached the top. BC is going to the Little League World Series.
The team team is back in BC as their run comes to an end, which went from local games all the way to the Little League World Series in Pennsylvania, the first time for Little Mountain in 12 years.
You dream of this, but you always know that there's so many pieces that have to fall into place to make this happen, and it's just, yeah, I mean, Ben probably said it's like a dream come true.
The team lost to Curacao last week, knocking them out of the round robin, but not before beating Australia and powerhouse Japan, a team that has won several world champions over the years.
Just felt like we shocked the world. Nobody expected that to happen, so I think we have lots to be proud of.
We've worked hard for some of these guys for many years now, with my son on the team as well. We've been playing since he was 4, so yeah, it's a very proud moment being a father and a coach.
How was it being there with your dad?
Yeah, it was awesome since he's like the manager and everything.
Do you always listen to him?
No, not always.
Before flying back to Vancouver, the team made a stop in Toronto where they were recognized on the field by the Blue Jays. What's next?
I don't know what we have planned.
School?
Oh yeah, I guess we have school.
Yeah.
I'm not excited about that though.
But the celebrations aren't over yet. Staff saying they've been invited to meet the Vancouver Canucks and the Vancouver Canadians at Nat Bailey Stadium.
These guys were celebrities in Williamsport, and yeah, it'll be a little bit of an adjustment back to, reality.
And after a whirlwind summer, the team is determined to make it back to the Worlds again next year, where they hope to hit it out of the park. Isabel Regam, CBC News at YVR. The recommended amount of alcohol people can safely drink in a week is changing, but so too are people's relationships with booze. Coming up, why many are embracing sobriety. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. A Quebec rapper has inadvertently found himself at the center of a linguistic controversy. It involves a video of him that was shared by the developer of Montreal's light rail project. The apparent problem, he was rapping in English.
We done ram a train, and now the building one. Oh, yeah.
This video was taken last year at an official event to unveil a replica of the REM train. But it was only this week the video stirred some controversy when it was posted on the Light Rail Project's TikTok channel. Mackie Lavender repping a jersey with the REM's official logo, rapping mostly in English.
You tell your friends that we met. They said, would you mind doing that verse in the train? We'll clear everybody and we'll just do a quick video. And they said, let's put it on TikTok.
The Journal de Montréal first noticed the post, which it reported was filled with complaints. After the paper asked why the rap was in English, the post was swiftly taken down. CBC has not seen the original post. Mackie Lavender says it was REM employees who asked if they could film him.
Yeah, I do find that weird. They were scared of the backlash that would come from as soon as someone mentions language, I guess.
CDPQ Infra, the developer in charge of the REM, wouldn't give an interview. Instead, it sent this statement. The content from the local artist did not meet our publication criteria. Our digital platforms highlight the different milestones of the project and are mostly in French.
Your friends will switch, your family will switch, everything gonna change.
Mackie Lavender has been rapping for years, mostly in English, he says, with the hope he can make it outside of Quebec.
On sait pas t'es qui, bro.
But he does rap in French as well.
I don't understand how that makes sense, because I'm Francophone as well. Like, I speak French, it's my first language.
He's not sure he'll continue rapping because the politics around language in Quebec is just too hard to handle. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Heavy fighting is being reported in the Russian-occupied regions in southern Ukraine. An unverified video appears to show Russian forces shelling Ukrainian positions near the city of Kherson. Ukraine's military claims to be taking the fight to the Russians in a pushback to win back territory. Further north in Kyiv, a team of international nuclear experts is visiting Ukraine today. The UN watchdog agency wants to visit the nuclear power plant in Ukraine, now under Russian control. Volodymyr Zelensky has long called for external intervention to avoid a radioactive catastrophe. Concern over shelling near the plant remains high. Local authorities have been conducting drills to prepare for possible contamination. Nearby residents are being supplied with anti-radiation iodine tablets. And Ukraine's second largest city appears to be back in the crosshairs of Russian missiles, bringing the war to the doorsteps of civilians far from the front lines further south. Susan Ormiston has more from Kharkiv.
As fighting ramps up in the south, unrelenting Russian attacks in the east, in Kharkiv. We arrived here shortly after a strike, mid-morning. A cafe chair splintered. Someone was badly injured here or died. The mayor counted 4 deaths and 11 injured in separate strikes. The owner of a shattered pharmacy measures out the damage, angry. They do it in the middle of the day. They're barbarians, says Alexander Maltsev. A caregiver, Valentina Pisareva, rushed here to help her patient. Since the start of the war, we've been sleeping in the basement. At night, I'm lying and counting the hits, and then in the morning I turn on the TV to hear about them. She climbs the stairs through broken glass, 5 floors, heavy steps. Saddened by this war and its carnage. A pensioner, she has nowhere else to go. The woman in the top apartment doesn't want to speak with us. She has disabilities.
Yes, she very upset.
Dennis, a volunteer, has shown up to help.
It's such a strange war.
How do you mean?
War against civils, mostly.
A young man, Alexander, checks out his apartment. He'd left for work just 30 minutes before the strike. I don't think their target was our building, he says. Our mayor said the shelling was random. Random shelling. Too familiar. A cleanup crew knows its job well, dispatched by the city. A soldier excavates to find fragments and the fuse, clues to what actually hit. Kharkiv is just 40 kilometers from the Russian border. Kharkiv is a strategic place for Russians and Ukrainians. Ukrainians hold this city, the second largest in Ukraine, but they are under constant bombardment. In the city center over the weekend, 2 large missiles leaving huge craters, just an ongoing terrorizing of the people here in Kharkiv. Another strike on an inexplicable target, a kindergarten yard. The kids were gone, but 2 teachers were wounded. There's no warning where the next shells will land. As the front lines shift and move, this city remains a target, and those left pray for an end. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Kharkiv.
The man who is credited with bringing the Cold War to a peaceful end has died. Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev was 91. While fondly remembered in the West, in Russia, it's another story entirely. Sasha Petrusik now on a complicated leader.
Mikhail Gorbachev will always be remembered as the last Soviet leader, the one who ended the Soviet Union. Unusually young by Russian standards, he came to power challenging many of the country's inefficiencies and dogmas. Surprisingly personable, he waded into crowds where his predecessors suppressed them. Under Gorbachev's radical economic and political reforms, dubbed perestroika, communism crumbled, and so did the Iron Curtain that separated Moscow's puppet regimes in Eastern Europe from the West. In an interview with CBC 20 years after the end of the Cold War, he insisted this was the right course.
I am really proud of what happened. It was a very thorny path.
At home, that created many enemies. On one side, an old guard being swept away. On the other, firebrand liberals like Boris Yeltsin, for whom Gorbachev wasn't moving quickly enough. He was much more popular in the West, reaching out to U.S. Presidents Ronald Reagan and George Bush, seen as a man they could do business with, taking the edge off Cold War rivalries. Abroad, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990. At home, he survived a coup attempt in 1991. And even now, Russian President Vladimir Putin uses what he calls Gorbachev's failures as justification for his own heavy hand.
And I think the younger generation of Russians who've been schooled under Putin will vilify Gorbachev as a man who sort of lost the empire and who gave in to these foreign Western influences.
Today, former Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney remembered his Soviet counterpart.
He sought restraint on the exercise of military power, and this is the opposite of what we're witnessing now with this reckless and unacceptable war in Ukraine.
Two Gorbachev legacies that remain unreconciled, even in death. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
As kids get ready for school in a few days, parents might want to consider adding vaccinations to the to-do list. A new survey shows thousands of students have fallen behind on routine shots. Ali Chiasson shows us the details and the concern.
Kids and parents rely on schools for vaccine access.
When the school program stops, it really is a hazard in terms of uptake of vaccine.
That confirmed by a new survey from the University of Toronto and vaccine advocacy group 19-0. Asked whether their children missed their school-given HPV, hepatitis B, or meningococcal vaccines since the pandemic started, just over half said they got them elsewhere, but the rest said they either weren't sure or, yes, their child definitely missed those vaccines.
Ontario closed more schools for a longer time than any other province. And in terms of the school programs for immunization, Ontario is the most behind of other provinces.
Public Health Ontario data shows that less than 1% of grade 7 kids during the pandemic were up to date on their HPV shots. And in that same 2020-2021 school year, only 17% of those kids got their Hep B and meningococcal vaccines.
We're not going to see the repercussions of this for years to come.
This family doctor says it needs to be addressed ASAP. Just last week, Toronto already saw a small outbreak of meningococcal disease in 3 people turn deadly. So when it comes to that vaccine,
got to get that number a lot higher than it is in order to keep our kids safe.
So I was like, oh, I got to get on that.
After the last chaotic 2.5 years of pandemic parenting, Romana Siddiqui decided today was the day to get her kids up to date.
So all 3 of your kids will be caught up on their vaccines come September. Do you feel relieved?
I'm glad that I'm getting this done before school starts, because again, with the hecticness of back to school, it's a very easy thing to slip through the cracks.
Experts say public health clinics, as well as family physicians and pharmacists, need to work in tandem to fill in some of those cracks and ensure more children get caught up on their boosters. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Amid multiple allegations of sexual misconduct against frontman Win Butler, the Canadian indie band Arcade Fire launched its international tour tonight. Those allegations have not been proven, but as Thomas Degla shows us, some fans want a refund on their tickets.
Bright lights, loud music, and the crowd singing every word. Facing calls to cancel their tour, Arcade Fire instead put on their concert in Dublin as planned, even as some fans stayed home.
I want to go see them. I do, but I can't justify it.
Kate McCreesh and her husband James have gone to see the band 9 times, from Atlanta to Edinburgh. Now for this show, they're demanding a refund.
It is not right at all. So I'm not going to support him.
Over the weekend, music website Pitchfork published accounts from former fans detailing alleged sexual misconduct by frontman Win Butler. He told the website the encounters were consensual, but added, "I am very sorry to anyone who I have hurt with my behavior."
They should offer refunds to fans who don't feel like good about going to see them play.
Just weeks ago at the Osheaga Festival, Arcade Fire reigned as Montreal royalty, a band that for years fostered an image as a family, with Butler and his wife Régine Chassagne together the face of Arcade Fire, racking up Junos, a Grammy, and fans worldwide. Band members even sometimes dancing in disguise amid their crowd.
In a way, it feels like we were closer to our audience than we have been before.
Now, though, Indie 88 in Toronto and CBC Music across Canada are among the radio stations pulling Arcade Fire's songs from regular rotation, and some in the U.S. are doing the same.
Almost all of the stations that I looked at that routinely played them dropped Arcade Fire by sometime probably on Monday.
The band is scheduled to come play shows here in Canada at the end of the year to cap off their international tour. As it stands, no one is getting a refund. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
After a cliffhanger day of last-minute wrangling, the two leaders did reach an agreement in principle on strategic weapons. It could lead to the first-ever treaty reducing, not just limiting, but reducing the number of long-range nuclear missiles.
We may not agree on everything, and indeed we don't agree on everything, but we believe in one great truth. The world has waited long enough. The Cold War must end.
The Soviet Union is committed to the objective set at Malta, completing before the end of this year the preparation of the START Treaty. I believe that this goal is attainable even though it is difficult.
On strategic weapons, though, the difficulty lies in the details. They are far from settled, and a top American negotiator says he is not celebrating yet.
In this business, the devil is in the details, and if you don't close the loopholes, an agreement isn't worth much.
The two presidents also agreed today on deep cuts in their chemical weapons stockpiles, although here too the details of how to destroy them remain vague. But most important for Gorbachev, there was a last-minute trade agreement. Not everything he wanted, but something he badly needs. American Lithuanians had lobbied hard for Bush to withhold a trade agreement, but Gorbachev fought for it. He cajoled American congressmen on the issue, even while sticking to his guns on Lithuania.
They met at night, raised their hands and said, "We're now out of the Soviet Union. This is absurd."
He went on the offensive. If you support Lithuania, why invade Panama?
If you love freedom so much, where were you when Panama was invaded?
Gorbachev said he wouldn't beg, but he wanted most favored nation trade status. If China can get that after Tiananmen Square, what should we do, he asked.
Maybe we should have presidential rule. Maybe we should fire some rounds into the Baltics.
Gorbachev continues to fascinate many Americans, like a man riding a tiger in a dangerous position, but carrying on with panache. Now he will have TV pictures beamed back home of him being mobbed by American fans and signing agreements on trade. Those agreements will include grain sales, but Gorbachev is still a long way from most favored nation status. What he has for now is a framework commercial agreement which is dependent on passage of a Soviet emigration law. Both he and President Bush know that any movement beyond that on trade will depend on the United States Congress, and that the Congress has not forgotten Lithuania. Tori Milewski, CBC News, Washington.
Welcome back. How much do you drink over the course of a week? How about in a day or during a night out? You might be rethinking your habits given new guidelines on drinking that suggest no amount of alcohol is safe. These are just proposed recommendations, but come from the group that advises Ottawa on the topic. They now define low risk as 2 or fewer standard drinks per week. The risk goes up from there. A standard drink is a glass of wine, a can of beer or a cider, or a shot of liquor. Having 3 to 5 drinks a week increases the risk of developing certain cancers. More than 7 drinks a week also increases the risk of heart disease and stroke. This is a sobering shift from guidelines that came out more than a decade ago, but it aligns with a movement you may be seeing online, or perhaps you're part of it yourself. More people seem to be embracing sobriety or choosing something called Sober Curious to see if cutting out booze for 1 month or longer, or even forever, is the right approach for them. Frances Stone is an addictions counselor in Vancouver. She joins us live now. Thanks for being with us, Frances.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
What sort of shift are you noticing among people, particularly women, when it comes to speaking openly and even celebrating their choice to stop drinking?
I think that I'm seeing a lot of women from all walks of life, including, stay-at-home moms and entrepreneurs, people that work Monday to Friday, and people in leadership positions that are questioning whether alcohol and drugs as well are the best way to be able to take care of themselves and relax after a long day or a long week. I think people are starting to question whether alcohol works for them.
And are you seeing more confidence in people in, being able to say to their friends, I'm not going to have a drink tonight, or I'm not going to smoke that joint? And is there a lot less pressure as well from peers and friends?
I know that my son is 19 years old, and he definitely has a different outlook on alcohol than all.
Oh, it sounds like we're just having a bit of a technical issue with you there. Okay, we're going to have to go to another story now, but hopefully we can chat with you more about this later on, Frances. We're going to head to a break now. At 6:42, you are looking at a live shot of over to North Vancouver and a little bit of the port there. It was a beautiful day today. The heat is in full force, and in these waning days of August, yet another heat wave coming our way. How long will it last? Johanna has her forecast next.
When I was a boy, and all the fellers my age, when you got out of school on Friday, you had a little bag you packed on your back, and you took a ball of line and a hook, and you shoved that in your pocket and your pocket knife, and you went. You were gone for the weekend. You were in the bush. If you knew of some of the older people having some dwelling in there, some camp, you went and you stayed in their camp as long as it was close enough to a river or a pond that had good trout supply. If not, you built yourself a lean-to, and you stayed in that for the weekend. And the thing about it is, if you leave here and you go in the woods for the weekend, you're also getting that physical exercise, You're walking for a full day in, and then you're walking for a full day back, and you're living off the land. Tell me that's not medicine. I'd say 90% of the generation before me were very knowledgeable in medicine. We lived in an isolated community. We had Flatbay River on the east, and we had Fishel's River on the west, the ocean on the front of us, and 90 miles of wilderness in the back of us. So we never had access to the outside, the hospitals and stuff like that, was somewhere you went if it was absolutely necessary. Everything else was done in community. We had one elderly lady in particular, Mary Webb, who everybody referred to as the medicine woman. She was a midwife, but she was also the medicine woman. She was the woman who could set people straight. Even though they may have had the knowledge, they never had the knowledge to a degree whereby they could use the medicine in a refined manner whereby you wouldn't bring any harm to yourself. So she was kind of like the protector. If you needed a confirmation on something, you went to her. When you're isolated, you hang on longer to your traditions than when you can push them aside and go to something else. So adjacency sometimes robs people of the importance of some of their culture.
Even I, as a fellow chorophobe who hates and fears dancing, I'm thinking, is that a little harsh?
It's very harsh, but it's the eyes and and the flick of the head. I literally feel the tears pricking my eyes, either for the fun of bopping and shaking your booty. I mean, because we haven't even touched embarrassment.
You don't have any memory that you ever danced as a baby?
Before teenage, yes. I can remember leaping around, getting hot and hysterical with Pass the Parcel and musical chairs, the things you have at children's parties.
But now, as adults, it's no longer about musical chairs.
Yes, and that's where people like you and me have to worry, because we go to weddings and we go to events where there is a dance floor, and we look at it with horror, and we just hope that when people lose inhibition, they have a habit of pulling you onto dance floors.
I hate that.
Exactly.
That's the thing that drives me crazy.
They won't listen to you saying, I don't want to.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change change life? Don't miss 2050, Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Well, NASA's Artemis 1 mission around the moon is set to attempt to relaunch this Friday. It was delayed earlier this week because of mechanical issues, but one of the 4 science experiments on board is from Canada. The UBC Pharmaceutical Sciences Department is sending yeast on the journey.
Yeah, it's a population of 6,000 different yeast mutants. Baker's yeast, brewer's yeast, the kind that you're familiar with. They're a great experimental organism, and we've been studying this particular collection of 6,000 mutants. My wife and I, who's also a scientist, a professor at UBC, have been studying these guys for about 25 years. And so we know a lot about how each one of these mutants, deleted for just one gene, behave, but we don't know how they're going to behave once they leave lower Earth orbit, beyond the protection of the Van Allen belts, and are exposed to fairly high levels of cosmic radiation.
Dr. Nislo will get his samples back after the spacecraft completes its uncrewed 42-day orbit around the moon. He says it will be the first time in 50 years biological materials will leave lower Earth's orbit. Perhaps make some cinnamon buns, some bread up in space.
I like that. Yeah. Remember when we were all about making bread over the pandemic, and now I'm just being replaced by bread. That's what they're studying instead of us. Yeah. It is very cool. That's such an important study for the future of space travel. So we'll be staying tuned, and I'll be watching the launch weather for Saturday very closely. Taking us to our own weather, we'll start with current temperatures. It was a hot one across the province today. Well, across the bottom half of the province, here are the current temperatures, and really a tale of 2 late summer forecasts, I should say. Right now, mid-30s in places like Castlegar, Soyuz, feeling like the 30s across Metro Vancouver today. Nanaimo, Campbell River under that heat warning, and we did break records in places like Port Alberni, West Van, Pemberton, Whistler, and that's showing up in our fire danger as well. You can see the reds across the south coast, where we're also seeing increasing drought conditions, and the northeast also looking at concerning fire danger. We're not out of the woods when it comes to fire season yet, even though our days are getting shorter. Notice the blue, though, Haida Gwaii, north coastal sections. That's thanks to all the rain we've had the past 48 hours. Those rainfall warnings have ended, by the way. Still showery, though, for Haida Gwaii and places like Terrace and Stewart. Checking on those temperatures as we head into the week. A little bit of a drop for Thursday, and as we head into the weekend, a little further drop. So a little more comfortable. You can see the places hitting 35 tomorrow, hitting 30. So a good 4 to 5 degree temperature drop. Still warm and still sunny for the most part for most of southern BC. Seeing a bit of showery activity up towards the Peace tomorrow, but generally that high pressure ridge continues to protect most of BC from anything trying to come in. And there is a big spinning low in the Gulf of Alaska, bringing some instability up towards Yukon. Tonight, we're seeing some thunderstorms up there, but that high pressure really protecting us. And that's giving way to this forecast, very much still in the middle of summer kind of feel. 26 for YVR the next couple of days will translate 30 inland. And note those overnight lows. It is going to be quite a warm one tonight and again Wednesday and Thursday night before we see more comfortable overnight temperatures. So again, that mugginess that you feel in the morning, that will be around. I've got the slight risk of a shower in on Saturday. That's the only time I think something might sneak through. By no means a washout or the rain that we do need. Things continue to dry out through early next week, but again, more comfortable temperatures for most of the weekend into early next week. And Anita, I've got to tell you something. Tomorrow is the last day of meteorological summer, which means on Thursday, I get to drink pumpkin spice lattes, but I'm the only one, just meteorologist.
You can have them all. You can have them all for the whole winter, fall season. You can have them all, Johanna.
Done. So funny.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Rising inflation was hit hard at the grocery store. It's been a challenge for many people to maintain a healthy diet and meet their food bills. So Joanne Roberts hit the supermarket with one couple and a dietitian and got some tips for stretching your grocery dollar.
I really love the pizza bobs.
Tiffany Dang and Kyle McKenzie rely a lot on frozen, pre-made food. They try to shop fresh, but sometimes they find food goes bad before they can eat it.
Sometimes, I just forget that, okay, I have that in the fridge.
The couple find themselves in the same predicament as many Canadians. They need easy meals that are still healthy and cheap.
Working full days, come home, we kind of just want easy to do stuff like that.
Janine Lafort owns Real Life Nutrition and is a registered dietitian. Lafort says there are ways to keep food costs down while still eating healthy.
So you can do things like kind of make a big batch of certain dishes that can be kind of portioned out and put in your freezer. And when you're making a larger batch, it saves time and it also saves some money too.
Like many Canadians, a big staple in Dang and Mackenzie's diet is meat. With it being an expensive item that Dang cooks with often, she wants to know if she can bring the cost down.
One of my favorite ingredients is red split lentils. They're actually lentils that have been split in half, and because they're cut in half, they cook really fast.
By changing the recipe and replacing a portion of meat with pulses like beans or lentils, people can still make filling meals that cost less. Although Mackenzie agrees that Lafort's tips are helpful, he still has one main concern.
Is there a way of doing it that just seems a bit more convenient, not overwhelming?
So even if you can find 10 minutes, little pockets of time where maybe you chop your carrots for the week.
Okay.
Get that done rather than, thinking of it as really overwhelming and doing it all at once.
Lafort's number one tip is for people to know what they'll eat. If something will get eaten, try to buy in bulk. Get quick to sell, discounted produce to eat the same day, or if it's possible, freeze it for later and save money that way. Lafort says these tips aren't just for Dang and Mackenzie. They're options all Canadians can consider when trying to bring their rising food costs down. Joanne Roberts, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, people can hate Nickelback, but they can sell out Rogers Arena time and time again, so.
They might be known as the most hated band of all time, but Nickelback isn't without fans. The BC band was shooting a new video today at SFU. We'll meet the fans eager to make an appearance next.
I could be killed, I could be in jail, so those are the kinds of things that I'm scared of when I go back home.
As an undocumented migrant worker, Danielo De Leon is no stranger to struggle. But after 13 years of helping others navigate the immigration system in Edmonton, he's now packing up his life. On July 21st, he received a deportation notice from the Canadian Border Services Agency, ordering he leave the country to return to the Philippines on Monday.
I might face a political persecution because of the Anti-Terror Law Act back home. They use that law to anyone who speaks against the government.
The 51-year-old arrived in Edmonton in 2009 through the Temporary Foreign Worker Program to work as a cleaner for Be Clean Building Maintenance. He championed the creation of a union after he and other workers alleged they weren't paid tens of thousands of dollars while working for the cleaning company. In 2017, he tried to extend his worker's permit but was shocked to learn his application had been rejected by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada.
I lost my status in 2017 when I applied to extend my open work permit on January 14, 2017. The decision came up on February 27, 2017, and I received the email on March 2, 2017.
Under federal rules, he had 90 days to apply for restoration of his temporary residence status and his authorization to work. But since losing his status, he's tried to appeal the decision with no success.
It's a good thing that I have a community support. If I don't, I'll be out, I might end up on the street. We came here when the government need a worker. We came here to work and at the same time to contribute in the society and in the community. And we are human too. I want them to respect us. We didn't came here illegally. Some of them are labeled as illegal migrants. Being undocumented is not illegal. It's not a crime.
In the meantime, he's hoping for a last-minute reprieve over the weekend with help from Edmonton Centre MP Randy Boissonneau. In a statement, a spokesperson told CBC that the office has reached out to De Leon and is in contact with the federal government. Bernali Yunchin, CBC News, Edmonton.
Some people think throwing tomato on their food makes everything taste better. I'm not one of those people. But what you're about to see, we don't recommend trying. That is a generous but hardly appetizing topping smeared all over a highway in California. A truck spilled thousands of tomatoes after hitting another vehicle and crashing into a median yesterday. Other cars tried to drive over the slick mess, but ended up crashing too. Okay, a story now you'll either love or hate. International music sensation Nickelback took over SFU today to rock the campus for their latest music video. Fans were invited to the shoot outside of Convocation Mall, and Gurpreet Kambo was there to talk about their passion, and he also got to meet the band.
Nickelback haters get plenty of days in the year, but today's all about love for the band. The folks I spoke with are real diehard fans. Get a lot of hate. Like, how do you respond to that?
Whatever. To each their own. There's music that I don't agree with and I don't like.
So how did you guys come to be fans of Nickelback?
I heard one of their songs when I was a lot younger and I fell in love with it. Well, people can hate Nickelback, but they can sell out Rogers Arena time and time again, so...
Right. So are you guys big fans of Nickelback?
Yeah, absolutely. Also being fellow Albertans, we wanted to come out and support. We went looking for them in Hannah one time, didn't find them. So now we're out here and I think we finally found them.
We got a chance to hear from the band themselves about the new song that's coming out.
Been away for a while. I mean, it's been 5 years since we put out new music, and so, you know, we're getting on the wheel again. You know, we're gonna do the whole thing. We gotta shoot some music videos. Then it's gonna be tour. So 2023 is gonna be back on tour, and then it's just away we go. And it's nice to be back at work. For a while there, I forgot what we did for a living.
Nickelback fans out here having a great time, and they'll get to see themselves in the next music video. Gurpreet Kambo, CBC News in Burnaby.
Nickelback is sort of the band that people often don't want to admit they like, but here on live television, I'll say I enjoy a song or two. In fact, I've been singing them all day. Thanks for being with us on CBC Vancouver News tonight. We will see you back here tomorrow.